Carnival's fleet looks like one big floating party, but every class has its own personality and a few that probably shouldn't still exist. So today we're ranking every Carnival class from worst to best, breaking down which ships deliver the most fun for your money and which ones feel like you've time traveled straight back to 1998. And honestly guys, I spent way too many late nights comparing these ships, like I'm cramming for a final exam that no one asked me to take. But hey, you guys deserve to know which ones are worth your vacation days. Hey y'all, I'm Edo with Family at Sea, where we help make every cruise unforgettable. Carnival has more ships than any other cruise line, but if you've ever tried to figure out which ones are actually worth booking, it feels like a moving target. The names all blur together, and somehow the cheapest option isn't always the worst, and the newest one isn't always the best. Each class has its own design, personality, and price point that quietly decides the kind of vacation you're about to have. Some of them are all about high energy fun, and others lean chill and nostalgic, and a few, well, let's just say they're hanging on out of pure stubbornness. So I've pulled the data, sailed the ships, and talked to countless cruisers to figure out which classes truly deliver that fun ship experience. If you're ready, I am. Let's go. Alright guys, before we get into the rankings, a quick note here. I'm not including the Splendor class or the Adventure class since I haven't sailed on either, and without first-hand experience or footage, it wouldn't be fair to rank them. You'll also notice that I'm ranking these by class rather than breaking out every individual ship. Most ships within the same class share the same DNA and deliver nearly identical experiences, so calling out each one individually would just be repeating myself and wasting your time. Ranking by class keeps the focus on what truly matters, which is how each generation of ships feels to sail and what makes one era of Carnival different from the next. Each class will be judged on the key things that shape your experience on board, how the ship feels and functions, what kind of crowd and energy it attracts, how the dining and entertainment hold up, and how well it all comes together once you're on board. So with that out of the way, let's start from the bottom with the oldest class still sailing under the Carnival name. The Fantasy class is where Carnival's story really begins. These ships defined what the fun ships meant long before that became a tagline. Class launched in 1990, and while there were once 8 of them, only the Elation and Paradise remain. At just over 70,000 gross tons and carrying around 2,100 guests, they're small by today's standards, but that scale gives them a certain charm. It's kind of like the neighborhood diner that everyone knows is outdated, but they still love it anyways. The ships feel intimate in a way that the newer ones can't replicate. There's only one pool, one main lounge, and a few spaces where everyone eventually ends up together. The decks are narrow, the ceilings are low, and the design screams 90s optimism with bold colors and patterns that, well, they never got the memo about subtlety. But it works because it's honest. You always know where the fun is, and that simplicity has its own appeal. Weekends turn into floating block parties filled with laughter, drinks, and poolside contests that go until the last person gives up. But during the week, the mood shifts into something slower and almost nostalgic, with locals taking a break from real life and families catching their first glimpse of the open ocean. You won't find elaborate dining or headline entertainment here. The meals are familiar, the shows are small, and everything feels closer to the guests running karaoke than to a Broadway production. But that's part of the magic. The Fantasy class isn't about extravagance or scale. It's about rediscovering the simple joy of being at sea and a reminder that before cruise ships became floating cities, they were just floating vacations. The Sunshine class has one of the most unusual histories in Carnival's fleet. The 3 ships, the Sunshine, the Sunrise, and the Radiance, each measure around 102,000 gross tons and carry roughly 3,000 guests, but none of them started out this way. They began life as the Carnival Destiny, Carnival Triumph, and Carnival Victory, part of a much older class of ships from the 1990s. But years later, Carnival stripped them down to their hulls, rebuilt them nearly from scratch, and gave them new names to mark a fresh start. And that rebranding might not have been a coincidence. The Carnival Triumph, which became the Carnival Sunrise, was the ship at the center of the infamous Poop Cruise in 2013, when an engine room fire left it powerless in the Gulf of Mexico for several days. The story made international headlines and dealt a serious blow to Carnival's reputation, so rebuilding and renaming the ship wasn't just a facelift, it was a way to reset the narrative and start over. And the result is a class that feels both old and new all at once. You can still sense the shape of the original ships beneath all the bright colors and new venues, and the rebuilds added water slides, ropes courses, and fresh dining concepts, but space is tight and crowds come fast. The Sunshine class packs a lot of fun into every corner, it just doesn't always leave much room to breathe. The atmosphere follows suit. On shorter sailings, the energy spikes right out of the gate with music, dancing, and pool games that begin before the ship even sets sail. On longer runs, the tempo evens out as the crowd settles in. It's a balance between spontaneous fun and controlled chaos, and the kind of energy that feels entirely carnival. Dining and nightlife keep that momentum going. The food lineup stays true to what works with options that are casual and familiar, while the bars and lounges carry the heartbeat of the ship. They're loud, warm, and always full of people you'll probably end up talking to because you're going to see them over and over during the cruise because, well, the ships are small. These ships are loud, they're social, and they're unapologetically carnival. And they're perfect for travelers who want to pack a week's worth of energy into a few days. They're not the most polished ships in the fleet, but they prove that sometimes a comeback can be just as memorable as a debut. And if hearing that has you thinking, okay, Evan, but how do I actually book the right ship without blowing my budget? Well, that's where Cruises It comes in. They're the travel agency we trust for every trip we take. You're not getting a call center or an automated system. You're getting a real person who knows your ship, your itinerary, and actually cares whether you're starting your vacation the right way. They've saved us thousands, unlocked perks we didn't even know existed, and made sure we never ended up like Frank, who once booked an obstructed view cabin without realizing the obstruction was a lifeboat the size of his actual house. Frank, buddy, if your balcony railing looks directly into an orange wall, that's not a view, that's a safety feature. With their low price guarantee and a team that genuinely knows cruising, Cruises It makes the entire process easier and a whole lot cheaper. So click the link in the description or call the number on the screen and tell them Evan from Family at Sea sent you. You'll be glad you did. The Conquest class is the foundation of what most people picture when they think of Carnival. The 5 ships, the Conquest, Glory, Valor, Liberty, and Freedom launched in the early 2000s with each around 110,000 gross tons and carrying roughly 3,000 guests. They were built during Carnival's growth years when cruising was booming and the goal was simple: to make ships bigger, better, and more social than ever. These ships were the first to fully capture that Carnival energy with open layouts, bold interiors, and a promenade that runs through the heart of the ship like a main street at sea. They're easy to navigate and full of personality, from the grand atriums to the busy pool decks that rarely quiet down. Nothing about the Conquest class feels formal or restrained, as the design was made for people who like to laugh, talk, and celebrate together. The vibe on board is unmistakably Carnival, and these ships are the reason the brand earned its party cruise reputation. Sea days feel like floating festivals with packed pool decks, live music echoing from multiple venues, and bartenders who know your order by day 2. It's loud, social, and sometimes chaotic, but in the kind of way that reminds you why you booked a Carnival cruise in the first place. These ships do the basics well. The food is consistent, the drinks are strong, and the staff keeps everything running smoothly, even when the energy peaks. But they're not built for quiet luxury, but that's never been the point anyways. The Conquest class isn't refined or reserved, but it's Carnival at its most authentic. It's where the brand's reputation for high energy fun really took off. For many cruisers, it's still the version of Carnival they fell in love with. And guys, I gotta be honest, I sailed on the Conquest earlier this year, and there were a few moments that really stick out in my memory, but one of them was that I couldn't walk across the ship at night without stumbling into a party I didn't plan on joining. It's loud, it's chaotic, and well, it's kind of impossible not to get pulled in. There's a conga line on one deck, karaoke on another, and someone ordering a round for people they just met at the Alchemy Bar. It's messy and unpredictable in all the right ways, and it's the kind of energy that reminds you that Carnival's never been about peace and quiet. The Spirit class feels like Carnival at its most balanced. The lineup, which includes the Spirit, Pride, Legend, Miracle, and Luminosa, launched in the early 2000s with each around 88,000 gross tons and carrying just over 2,100 guests. These ships were built to fit through the Panama Canal, which gave them a longer, sleeker shape and a design that flows better than anything that came before them. They're smaller than Carnival's newer megaships, but they use their space so well that you rarely notice. The ship experience feels thoughtful, as you can walk from one end to the other without getting turned around, and the decks are wide open, and the wraparound promenade invites you outside more often than in, and every corner feels purposeful. The Spirit class doesn't rely on big ticket attractions. It wins you over with comfort, scale, and a sense that you're part of the ship's rhythm rather than a crowd being managed. The atmosphere on board keeps a steady pulse. It's social but not rowdy, and fun without feeling forced. There's plenty of laughter and plenty of poolside games, but also quiet moments in shaded lounges and along the railings with nothing but the ocean in view. The crowd tends to skew older or more experienced and filled with people who've cruised before and know what they want. A ship that's big enough for variety, but small enough to feel human. The Spirit class succeeds because it feels personal. The service is warm, the layout makes sense, and the energy on board never overwhelms you. It's the kind of ship that reminds you why people fell in love with cruising in the first place. It's the perfect middle ground between Carnival's wild side and its more relaxed future. The Venice class is one of the most interesting chapters in Carnival's modern history. These ships, the Venezia and Firenze, didn't start out as Carnival builds. They began life as part of Costa Cruises, which is Carnival's Italian sister brand, before being transferred over and redesigned into what's now referred to as fun Italian style. Each ship comes in around 135,000 gross tons and carries roughly 4,000 guests, putting them in the same size range as Carnival's Vista class. But everything about them feels different. When Carnival acquired and rebranded them, the goal wasn't just to add more ships, it was to experiment with identity. The Venice class blends Carnival's American energy with Costa's European aesthetic, and the result is something that feels half Italian Riviera and half poolside party. The decor is striking with marble columns, murals, and gold accents where you'd expect neon lights. It's more elegant than anything else in the fleet, yet it still carries that Carnival heartbeat. Life on board feels familiar but reimagined. You'll hear the same laughter, music, and trivia echoing through the halls, but the spaces feel more composed. Evenings stretch out over the spritz bars, piano lounges, and atrium concerts that feel a little more refined than the typical deck party scene. The ships still know how to have fun, they just do it with a touch of style. But there are trade offs. Some Carnival loyalists find the layout unfamiliar, and not every space flows as naturally as purpose built Carnival ships. But the Venice class proves that Carnival can evolve without losing its core. It's still vibrant, social, and approachable, just with better lighting and an espresso in hand. These ships represent Carnival's first real experiment with reinvention in modern times, and a look at what happens when the brand borrows from its roots but isn't afraid to rewrite the formula. The Dream class marks a real turning point in Carnival's evolution. The trio of ships, the Dream, the Magic, and the Breeze, each measure around 130,000 gross tons and carry 3,700 guests, making them the first ships that truly felt like floating resorts. When they debuted in the late 2000s, they represented Carnival's leap into a new era with bigger ships, smarter layouts, and a more polished kind of fun. Everything about the design feels intentional. The decks are wider, the promenade wraps around the ship, and open-air spaces invite guests to stay outside longer. The layout flows naturally, pulling you from one experience to the next without the crowding or confusion of earlier classes. And for the first time, Carnival found a way to feel both grand and grounded. Large enough to feel special, but still feel small enough to stay personal. The atmosphere on board hits a sweet spot between energy and ease. Families and groups of friends keep the days lively while evenings stretch into a more relaxed rhythm. The pool deck is busy but rarely overwhelming, and the ocean facing Lanai offers quiet moments with nothing but waves in view. This is Carnival in its groove, as the ships are playful but composed and vibrant without shouting for attention. The Dream class also introduced features that would define future ships with dedicated pub spaces, outdoor seating, and more thoughtful zones that separate the noise from the calm. It was the blueprint for everything that came after. And even now, these ships hold up. They deliver the full Carnival experience without the crowds of the megaships or the wear of the older ones. The Dream class feels like the moment Carnival figured out who it wanted to be, and finally got it right. The Vista class marks the moment Carnival went from the big ships to mega ships. The three vessels, the Vista, Horizon, and Panorama, each measure around 133,000 gross tons and carry close to 4,000 guests, making them the first ships designed to stand shoulder to shoulder with the industry's giants. They feel larger, more ambitious, and undeniably more complex. Every corner has something happening, yet the layout manages to keep it from feeling overwhelming. These ships took Carnival's familiar design language and stretched it in every direction. Instead of one central atrium running the show, the energy flows through a network of themed spaces with breweries, lounges, and open-air promenades that blur the line between indoors and out. You can start the day with breakfast overlooking the wake, drift into a trivia game by accident, and end up at a live band before dinner without ever feeling like you planned any of it. The atmosphere is high energy but surprisingly polished. There's still plenty of carnival noise with its signature music, laughter, and pool games, but it feels more curated than chaotic. Families and groups fill the decks, yet there's room for everyone. These are ships built for people who want to do everything and still have space to catch their breath. The Vista class is also where Carnival started treating dining and nightlife like experiences rather than simply options. The meals feel more intentional, the lounges are livelier and more distinct, and evenings run like a continuous soundtrack rather than a schedule. In a way, these ships captured Carnival's growing confidence. The fun is still front and center, but with the Vista class, the fun has structure and a sense of rhythm that keeps the chaos in check. The Vista class didn't reinvent Carnival, but it showed what happens when the brand gets serious about its own kind of fun. And coming in at number 1 is the Excel class, which represents Carnival's modern era. This is the moment the line stopped playing catch-up and started leading again. The trio currently includes the Mardi Gras, Celebration, and Jubilee, but will soon introduce the fourth in 2027 with Festival. Each comes in around 180,000 gross tons and carries more than 6,000 guests at full capacity. They're massive, but they're also a statement. Everything about them feels deliberate, with open-air zones, signature neighborhoods, and architecture that finally makes a ship this large feel connected instead of crowded. Walking through one of these ships is like moving through 6 different vacations at once. Each zone has its own personality, from the family-friendly energy of the Ultimate Playground to the laid-back feel of Summer's Landing and the glow of Grand Central where the ship seems to breathe at night. There's more variety here than on any ship Carnival has ever built, and yet it all fits together. The atmosphere hums with energy but never tips into mayhem. There's always something happening, with live music in one corner, a roller coaster looping above you, and the smell of barbecue drifting across the deck. But the scale spreads the fun out, and you can still find a quiet place to watch the ocean, which is something that wasn't always possible on smaller, busier ships. And dining and nightlife finally reached the level Carnival has been chasing for years, with themed restaurants, chef-driven menus, and bars that feel like destinations of their own that give the experience a sense of range. Everything looks and tastes like Carnival figured out what it does best and doubled down. The Excel class is more than a new generation of ships. It's the payoff for decades of trial and error. They capture the brand's soul. It's social and unpretentious, but present it with confidence and scale that Carnival never quite managed before. It's not just the future of the fleet, it's the best version of Carnival that's ever existed. On a personal level, we were on the Celebration just a couple of months ago, and one of my favorite moments didn't happen during a show or at some grand venue. It happened at the Alchemy Bar. Midway through the cruise, I was hanging out with some new friends I met on the ship, and somewhere between the stories and inside jokes, they surprised me by inducting me into the Alchemy Bar Drinking Society. Now, it sounds like AA for people that maybe aren't ready for AA yet, but it wasn't about the drinking or getting wasted or anything like that. It was about belonging. And in that moment, surrounded by new friends and laughter that came easy, I realized that this was the heart of Carnival. It's not just the ship or the destinations, it's the people who make you feel like you're a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And as you look across every class of ships on Carnival, you start to see a pattern. Each one tells a piece of Carnival's story, from the scrappy little ships that built its reputation to the massive new ones redefining it. But I got bad news for you. Not every Carnival ship lives up to the potential, and a few still carry the rough edges that earned the brand its reputation years ago. But the good news? The Carnival Celebration is not one of them. It's the ship that shows what happens when Carnival finally gets everything right. So don't stop here. Come hang out with me in that one, where I break down exactly what makes the Celebration worth sailing. If you're ready, I am. Let's go.